Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We have begun a new chapter, chapter 28, Supermind, Mind, and the Overmind Maya. And we are on page 286, the first sentence.
I'll read each sentence and then we'll proceed. But it has still to be made clear how this division came about in the indivisible, by what peculiar self-diminishing or self-effacing action of consciousness force in the being. For since all is a movement of that force, only by some such action obscuring its own plenary light and power, can there have arisen the dynamic and effective phenomenon of the ignorance. So, we'll look at this. So, he has told you here that supermind is the one that creates the universe, and supermind is one. But it becomes a multiplicity in the physical world. So, he is asking, what is the process by which the one becomes the many? Or to put it in other ways, how does the formless become form? How does the infinite become finite? That's what he's basically saying. We know the principle, that this is how it's happening. But what is the process? How does it happen? Okay. This is a problem that even science has to face. We know that oxygen and hydrogen combined gives water. But how does that happen? We still don't know. So,
well, how does the indivisible become ignorance?
That's exactly what he's explaining here.
What he's explaining.
He's explaining. How does the knowledge become ignorance? How does the infinite become finite? How does the one become the many? This is a correspondence. So, it is knowledge, full consciousness that becomes unconsciousness here. So, by exclusive self-concentration, he has told you. Okay? Maybe he'll repeat that here. We'll see. So, no, that he has already told you, I think. That exclusive concentration. No, he'll tell us that. Yeah.
No, it comes in the last sentence.
It comes afterwards, later on. Exclusive concentration, that's a process. So, what is that? We'll see. So, but it has still to be made clear how this division came about in the indivisible, by what peculiar self-diminishing or self-effacing action of consciousness force in the being. For since all is a movement of that force, only by some such action obscuring its own plenary light and power can there have arisen the dynamic and effective phenomenon of the ignorance. He has said in another place he has said that consciousness has got three powers. The power to take any stance, whatever it wants, at the highest level, at the lowest level. It has got the power to diminish itself. So these are the powers that consciousness has. And if it didn't have these powers, manifestation would not have been possible. So it has the power to diminish itself. Okay, so
he calls it a peculiar self-diminishing.
Peculiar, and that's why Maya. It's a mystery how this happens. When you look at the physical world, everything is a Maya. It's a mystery. We really don't know. The more you think about it, the more. Most easy example is the water and hydrogen. Hydrogen and oxygen. Both are gases. And when they combine, how does it give this? Everything, when you think about it, is really peculiar. All light, colors, okay, they have a certain vibrational frequency. When that frequency changes, the quality changes. Red becomes blue, blue becomes violet. How? So it's a Maya. Anirvachaniya. You can't explain it logically. So, that's why he's saying peculiar. By what peculiar self-diminishing or self-effacing action of consciousness force in the being. For since all is a movement of that force, manifestation requires movement, and in that force, only by some such action, obscuring its own plenary light and power, can there have arisen the dynamic and effective phenomenon of the ignorance. Note the word dynamic. Ignorance is dynamic. There is movement in it and power also. But this problem can be left over to be treated in a more close examination of the dual phenomenon of knowledge-ignorance, a half-light between the full day of this
knowledge, which makes our consciousness. You missed it.
Oh, I missed a line. Okay, yeah. But this problem can be left over to be treated in a more close examination of the dual phenomenon of knowledge-ignorance, because knowledge-ignorance half-light has skipped, which makes our consciousness a blend of light and darkness, a half-light between the full day of the supramental truth and the night of the material inconscience. All that is necessary to note at present is that it must be in its essential character an exclusive concentration on one movement and status of conscious being, which puts all the rest of consciousness and being behind and veils it from that one movement's now partial knowledge. So, he is saying that it is exclusive concentration. We discussed very briefly exclusive concentration. Even when we are concentrating on something, we are using the principle of exclusive concentration. You know you have a house in America, you know you have a daughter in Orville, but when you are concentrating here, those things are all put in the background of your mind. You are not thinking. Only difference is, in our case, we can easily recover the knowledge which we have put behind. But in the spiritual planes of consciousness, it requires a huge effort to get back what you have put in the background of your consciousness. And that's the ignorance which you have to recover. It's a long process of lives.
Yes. Yes.
Exclusive concentration.
But what about I won't use a strong word, but the losing of memory or the forgetfulness in the aged?
That's a phenomenon of the ignorance. That's a phenomenon of the ignorance. You have a limitation of consciousness. With aging, which is also a process, because time and space are here in this world. So time takes its toll. Isn't it?
Yes.
So time takes its toll. So that is what happens. And it's a form of imperfection. An extreme form of imperfection. I have cases at home now where this is very, very...
No.
Okay. My mind is completely blank, it is gone. He is healthy enough bodily, but no remembrance at all, nothing. Nothing registers in the mind. Old memories are there because the neurons in the brain, they retain the old impressions. But the new things coming don't register. The old things which have registered already are there. Old things he'll remember. But new things coming in doesn't register. Okay, so aging is a process of the ignorance. And that's all. There are many other making mistakes, Alzheimer's, all these things are all processes of the ignorance. Making mistakes. Okay. So he's saying full day of the supramental truth and the night of the material inconscience. Night of the material inconscience, he's using the word material inconscience, but the inconscience is even below matter. It's absolutely right down to the bottom. Because even in matter, there is some sort of consciousness. Force is there and consciousness is there. Okay, so he says, all that is necessary to note at present is that it must be the essential character of an exclusive concentration. I will satisfy myself with this because the next thing, the process, knowledge and the ignorance, he discusses in Book 2, Part 1. I will just take a small and go to the contents page, okay, and see how he has arranged the... Oh, just 1 second. Yeah. So he has arranged, Srivendra has arranged this one in Book 1, the omnipresent reality and the universe. Okay. That's the whole, what he discusses. Whatever is there in the physical universe, the omnipresent reality and its relation with the universe. And he's establishing the relationship in 28 chapters. Then you go to Book 2, Part 1. And Book 2 is the knowledge and the ignorance and the spiritual evolution. The spiritual evolution is Book 2, Part 2. Which very few people, even spiritual people, have discussed. In fact, very few, nobody. Except perhaps Teilhard de Chardin. Yes. Teilhard de Chardin is the only one who has spoken about an omega point towards which he uses the word omega point.
And a new sphere. He speaks of the new sphere.
Yeah. So he has had a glimpse of that. And he knew about Sriramdo. I have come across some places where he knew about Sriramdo, but not much of interaction and not much of any information about that. Okay. So
well, the church prohibited him from printing anything for 20 years.
Yeah, because he's talking of evolution. Exactly. Whereas the church doesn't want evolution. They want a ready-made manifestation. The divine makes souls. It's all ready-made. So, in fact, it is strange that even in modern times, this idea is still persistent in Christianity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
So,
but it was decided in 500 that there would be no more talk of reincarnation.
That's right.
In the church.
That's right. Otherwise, before then there was. Because everybody who goes to a spiritual level knows that there is reincarnation. And now there is solid, I can't call it proof, but evidence. Okay? Probability of evidence. 2,000 cases at least available on internet for the reincarnation. And many of it in America, because they do a lot of research there. Okay. The other day I saw one video where a small child is going on a bridge, okay, and with the mother, and she says, "Oh, Mom, this is where I drowned. This is the place where I drowned in the river." And the mother is surprised. What are you talking about? And then they find out that afterwards, then the most famous case is that 5-year-old boy who recognizes all planes, aeroplanes. He died in Second World War. He was shot down by Japanese. So all these are, you can disbelieve if you want, but very, very convincing evidence is there. And in fact, a movie has been made on that. Okay, a movie has been made where a man who didn't believe in Christ or Christianity, and he didn't believe in anything spiritual. His son died when he was 9 years old. I don't remember the title of the movie. He died when he was 9 years old, and this man was very disturbed by that. One day he was driving in his car very fast, and he had an accident. And in that accident, he came out of his body. For about 15-20 minutes, he was not alive. He had come out. He met his son in the subtle world, and then he completely changed. He says there is life after death. So this made into a movie. So all these, lot of evidence is there. So this is the arrangement of the book. First, book 1, the omnipresent reality and the universe. Book 2, part 1 is the knowledge and the ignorance. What's the relation between the knowledge and the ignorance? Okay? How does the knowledge become the ignorance? In great detail. In fact, how many? 14 chapters, knowledge and ignorance. Then, book 2, part 2, knowledge and the spiritual evolution, 28 chapters. That's how he has arranged the whole thing. Okay? So now we come back to our supermind, mind and the overmind, Maya. Yeah. So he's saying that we will look in detail afterwards, but all that is necessary to note at present is that it must be in its essential character an exclusive concentration on one movement and status of conscious being, which puts all the rest of consciousness and being behind and veils it from that one moment's now partial knowledge. That is the reason why very often when you have a spiritual experience, it's like a remembrance. It's not something new. Oh, I knew about this. I always known. It's a remembrance that you... That's why we have so many... in our Sanskrit, we have smritis. It is remembered and written down. Many, many texts are all smritis. And there are shrutis, those which are heard. Okay. So can we go to the next one? Okay. Yes. So I read the whole para first. Still, there is one aspect of this problem which must be immediately considered. It is the gulf created between mind as we know it and the supramental truth consciousness, of which we have found mind in its origin to be a subordinate process. For this gulf is considerable, and if there are no gradations between the two levels of consciousness, a transition from one to the other, either in the descending involution of spirit into matter or the corresponding evolution in matter of the concealed grades leading back to the spirit, seems in the highest degree improbable, if not impossible. Okay. For mind as we know it is a power of the ignorance, seeking for truth, groping with difficulty to find it, reaching only mental constructions and representations of it in word and idea, in mind formations, sense formations, as if bright or shadowy photographs or films of a distant reality were all that it could achieve. Supermind, on the contrary, is in actual and natural possession of the truth, and its formations are forms of that reality, not constructions, representations, or indicative figures. No doubt, the evolving mind in us is hampered by its encasement in the obscurity of this life and body. And the original mind principle in the involutionary descent is a thing of greater power to which we have not fully reached, able to act with freedom in its own sphere of province, to build more revelatory constructions, more minutely inspired formations, more subtle and significant embodiments in which the light of truth is present and palpable. But still, that too is not likely to be essentially different in its characteristic action, for it too is a movement into the ignorance. For it too is a movement into the ignorance, not a still, unseparated portion of the truth consciousness. There must be somewhere in the descending and ascending scale of being an intermediate power and plane of consciousness. Perhaps something more than that, something with an original creative force through which the involutionary transition from mind in the knowledge to mind in the ignorance was effected, and through which again the evolutionary reverse transition becomes intelligible and possible. For the involutionary transition, this intervention is a logical imperative. For the evolutionary, it is a practical necessity. For in the evolution, there are indeed radical transitions from indeterminate energy to organized matter, from inanimate matter to life, from a subconscious or submental to a perceptive and feeling and acting life. Feeling life and acting life. From primitive animal mentality to conceptive reasoning mind, observing and governing life and observing itself also, No, it's observing and governing life, and observing itself also, able to act as an independent entity and even to seek consciously for self-transcendence. But these leaps, even when considerable, are to some extent prepared by slow gradations which make them conceivable and feasible. There can be no such immense hiatus as seems to exist between supramental truth consciousness and the mind in the ignorance. Big para. But basically what he's saying is that there has to be gradations, which we may not see, but there are gradations. If the gradations and links are not there, how will you go up? You can't go from the bottom to the top unless there is a ladder with links. That's basically what he's saying. And those links, we'll examine now what is there. And that's what he'll tell you. Higher mind, over mind, intuitive mind, element mind and over mind. Those are the links. Okay. We'll do one thing. We'll read the summary of what he's saying. And then we go back to the sentences. You get the idea in a gist what he's saying. And then we go into details. We have seen the principle of the connection between the superconscient to the inconscient or the subconscient. But these two are opposite poles in the scale of existence. The one becomes the many, the infinite tapers off into the finites of the universe, the formless puts on forms, the permanent becomes transient, the timeless and spaceless becomes transience and dimensional space. We may examine one aspect of this polarity. Let us see the relation of the mind of knowledge to the mind of ignorance. Okay, he is examining only that. He is not examining force, he is not examining Ananda. He is saying only we'll focus on one, mind. Okay. We may examine one aspect of this polarity. Let us see the relation of the mind of knowledge to the mind of ignorance. The former is a truth consciousness, and the latter is a limited mind of man in ignorance. These two are so far apart from each other that it seems to connect the two without intermediary gradations seems impossible. Okay, so that's what he's saying. These are so far apart from each other that it seems impossible. I have missed out the word impossible. Just 1 minute. That it seems impossible to connect the two without intermediary connections. Then, the mortal mind of man is in ignorance. It seeks for truth. It doesn't possess the truth. The supramental is in eternal possession of the truth. Its formations are realities. The thoughts of the mortal mind are artificial constructions, temporary images in the brain. Of course, this mind is much hampered by the downward pull of the grossness of matter and the impurities of the vitality. There must be some transitional gradation between the two opposite poles. In the involutionary downward descent, there have to be intermediate steps by logical necessity. In the evolutionary ascent, the intervening steps are a practical necessity. One is a logical necessity and the other is a practical necessity. It's putting it in a different way. In the evolution already achieved, we see these gradations. Indeterminate energy creates organized matter. Now that's very interesting. He's talking of matter as organized, whereas the inconscient is not organized, chaotic, undetermined, okay? Indeterminable also in a sense. Indeterminate energy creates organized matter. Matter is organized. The number of electrons determines the nature of the thing. No? There is a very clear law that operates there in matter. Determines the nature of the element. Inanimate matter produces subconscient life forms, plants. Subconscient life produces sense-based forms, insects, lower animals, etc. Animal life develops into mentalized life. The intelligent life seeks to go even beyond itself. So the gradations are there. What we can see in evolution, gradations are there. So the sequential steps clearly establish the need for transitional steps between the mind of knowledge and the mind of ignorance. This is what he is saying. Logically, there has to be a connection. If my contention that the supermind is the mind here connected. And in evolution, it is a practical necessity. You have to go up. You have to go up to get that. So this is the gist of what he is saying. Now we can go into details. Srimdar is not satisfied by only stating his thing. He goes into great detail to show that what he is talking is not nonsense. That makes a lot of sense. He goes into great detail. There is another thing also that is there. He bases himself very much on experience. Sometimes he uses logic, but not always. Okay. Sometimes he says it must be like this, it must be like that. He is basing himself on experience. That's why there are many who say life divine is not philosophy. In fact, he himself has admitted. He says life divine is not logic. It's based all on experience. I just told what I have experienced. So, there is a big difference between philosophy in the West and philosophy in India. In India, all philosophy, including Upanishads, are all experience-based. Whereas in the West, it is often speculative, mental speculation.
The word itself is darshan. Huh? The word itself is darshan.
Yes.
What they have seen, they have written it down.
Exactly. In fact, in India, the word darshan means sight, and that's a word also used for philosophy. Darshan. Okay. So now, we see each sentence. Still, there is one aspect of this problem which must be immediately considered. It is a gulf created between mind as we know it and the supramental truth consciousness, of which we have found mind in its origin to be a subordinate process. That he has already told you, that mind is a fallen condition of the supermind. Okay? That correspondence he has already established in the previous chapter. Sat becomes matter, Chit Shakti becomes the vital energy, prana, Ananda becomes the psychic being, and supermind becomes mind. And he calls the Sat Chit Ananda supermind truth consciousness the divine quaternary. And the lower hemisphere is mind, life, body. For this gulf is considerable, and if there are no gradations between the two levels of consciousness, a transition from one to the other, either in the descending involution of spirit into matter or the corresponding evolution in matter of the concealed grades leading back to the spirit, seems in the highest degree improbable, if not impossible. Even if you grant, it seems to be very difficult to imagine how it can be. Improbable and impossible. He is using two words. Okay, so, for mind as we know it is a power of the ignorance seeking for truth. Now look at that. Mind, our mind as we know it is a power of the ignorance seeking for truth. It's a power of the ignorance. Normally you would say ignorance is a useless thing. Ignorance is ignorance. You don't know anything. It's the power of the ignorance seeking for truth.
In one part he says one has to be conscious first before one can be ignorant.
Yeah, that's right.
Very interesting point.
So, the power of the ignorance seeking for truth, groping with difficulty to find it, reaching only mental constructions and representations of it in word and idea, in mind formations, sense formations, as if bright or shadowy photographs or films of a distant reality were all that it could achieve. Now, he is talking of mind formations. This we know, that the mental substance arranges itself into a form. Sounds funny, but this is exactly what it is. There is a mental substance and it forms itself into it makes itself into, suppose you are thinking of a mountain, okay? The mental substance arranges itself into a mountain. Then you understand what it is. If you can't understand clearly, your mind is not able to make forms. This mental substance makes forms. And these forms mother could see. And it is one who has got, what is it called? Capacity to see subtle forms. What is it called? Clairvoyance is the word. That's right. Clairvoyance and clairaudience. Okay. Subtle sounds you can hear, or you can see subtle forms, clairaudience.
What is the Sanskrit word for this thing which you are calling as mental substance?
I don't remember. Yeah.
Sense mind is called manas. And,
So he's saying sense formations. That's interesting. Sense formations. The eye makes a sense formation in the mind. That is the manas. So he is making a distinction between mental forms and sense formations.
Ranganath, elsewhere I think he calls these sense formations as percepts and the mind formation as concepts.
Concept. That's right. Exactly. So a percept is, what is the eye doing? It's not thinking. It just gathers an image and sends it to the brain. It's an visual sense perception. The ear is sending a vibration and auditory sensation. So sense perceptions. Touch is also a sense perception. Okay? So sense formations and mental formations. Very interesting what he's saying. Yeah. Okay, so
is it chitta, Ranganath? Chitta?
Chitta is the mental substance, yes. But chitta is not pure mental. It is the stuff of consciousness. From the use of the word stuff of consciousness. But chitta is more vital stuff. No? But there is no clear gradation between the two. It's like a sea, and the lower portion is dark and the higher portion is slightly more transparent. Chitta is definitely a word. Chitta is the vital stuff, and chit is the mental stuff.
It's not used for that.
Huh?
The word chit is used only for consciousness. It's not used for substance.
Yeah, that's right. But chitta is there. The word chitta is there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Chitta is the storehouse of all memories, basically, where everything goes. It absorbs everything. Everything is there in that chitta.
And how does that connect with the Akashic records, where everything is stored?
Akashic records is universal, whereas the chitta is individual to every individual.
The Akashic records are all in the subliminal. Okay? They are all stored in the subliminal. And the subliminal can be individual as well as universal. In fact, there is a very interesting case in Arizona. There is an institute. It's called the Edgar Cayce Institute, where he had this power of going into his subliminal, and he has made readings. Okay, one of the readings was that they would discover the scrolls somewhere in Israel, and it came true. So, in other words, all these Akashic records are there in the subliminal, and anyone who wants can have access to them. In fact, when Mother was making Huta make paintings, in Savitri painting, Meditations on Savitri, big book is there, A4 size. There is a painting where all these things are stored, and you can go there and exactly as in a library, you can go and Go to the index cards, all those. And if you know the author name, you look for the author, pull out the book and all the books are there. All you have to do is to go and get it there. So this is exactly how it works also in the subliminal. All I have to do is to think about it, I will get the information. It's almost like the internet. It's exactly, the internet is a very gross representation of the subliminal. But mind you, Sri Aurobindo says, just as in the internet, you can have mistakes, errors can be there, because everybody is putting stuff, okay? So Sri Aurobindo says that the intraconscient, or what is the subliminal, there can be error. But if you go up, less and less error. But this subliminal, horizontal, deep inside you, there can be error. But still, there is a huge amount of knowledge available there. So the Akashic record refers to that. Everything is stored. And there is a very interesting image that the Theosophy has given, okay, to explain this, how it gets recorded. Okay, everything that happens is basically a vibration. That we accept. When I speak, vibrations. Okay, even when an image comes, it's subtle vibration. Everything is vibration. So they give this example. I found it very interesting. Take a big dish of water. The water is absolutely stable. Okay, I take my finger and in the middle I do this. What will happen? There will be a concentric circle. It will go out like that to the waves. But because there is friction, the wave will die out after a certain time. But in the subliminal, there is no friction. So that vibration will always be available. It is a very interesting explanation. It is there in Theosophy. Okay, so I found it very interesting. That's how it never disappears.
I wonder why all these civilizations that died, and that information is still there in subliminal.
Yes.
Why has no one tapped it?
Capacity is not there.
Exactly.
Capacity is not there. But those who have the capacity are interested in other things. They don't want to know whether Atlantis existed or not.
No, but for example, they had much more evolved machinery and technology in many of these.
That's what is suspected. That's what is thought, yeah. But we don't know for sure. But the claim of many of our Indian people claims that in the Vedic period we knew how to fly, we knew about nuclear energy. All these you can take with a pinch of salt. So, because it is more symbolic than anything else. Sri Aurobindo also dismisses these things in a very mild manner. And something is very stupid they talk about. For instance, one minister in Assam, okay, he said that we knew about the internet. What's the proof? He said, look, Sanjay is sitting with Dhritarashtra and he is seeing Kurukshetra war, what's happening, and reporting to Dhritarashtra. How could he know without internet? He actually made this statement. Okay, so these are all foolish things which you misinterpret entirely. It is subtle sight. It's not internet. Okay, so let's get back to our text. So he's saying about the gradations he's been speaking. Huh? So he's saying that mind, as we know it, is a power of the ignorance seeking for truth, groping with difficulty to find it, reaching only mental constructions and representations of it in word and idea, in mind formations, sense formations, as if bright or shadowy photographs or films of a distant reality were all that it could achieve. Okay, so mind can...
So, yeah. So when the poet brings down from the highest realms poetry, is it still that mind formation?
It takes the form of a...
word and idea, it says right here.
No, I think when he's talking of mind formation, it's a product of the brain from this end. But when you receive from on top, it's not a formation. You're just receiving something that is a reality. I think it's different.
It makes more sense to me, yes.
Whatever is a thought process is a formation, it's a mental form. And that form can dissolve. But if it's a very strong formation, mental formation, it takes a life of its own and tries to realize itself. That's another thing. A well-formulated thought takes a life of its own and tries to manifest itself through other minds. This is how Marconi discovered the radio in Italy 1 or 2 years after Jagadish Chandra Bose showed that by making a vibration here, it could be received elsewhere. But Jagadish Chandra Bose was not interested in exploiting it for commercial purposes, but he showed that. Okay, but it was that thought went into him, and he has been able to get the idea and the patent for it. Okay, so it can go out into many places. For mind has been, that we have seen. So very clear Swami is saying, bright or shadowy photographs or films of a distant reality were all that it could achieve. That's mind. Now that's interesting because that's exactly what the image of the cinema can be applied also. Okay, the world, what you are seeing is nothing but images. Okay, they are not reality, but there is a reality behind the image. Just like the screen, the cinema screen is a reality. It's self-existent. The images on it are not real. So, supermind, on the contrary, is in actual and natural possession of the truth, and its formations are forms of that reality, not constructions, representations, or indicative figures. It's a difference between going to a particular place and seeing a photograph of that. Yeah. That's exactly what he's saying. So, not construction. No doubt, the evolving mind in us is hampered by its encasement in the obscurity of this life and body. Mind outside the body has got a different power. In fact, that's a higher mind, element mind, that's outside the body. That's got a different power. But when it is in the body like ours, then it gets limited in capacity. That's what he's saying. Okay. No doubt the evolving mind in us is hampered by the encasement in the obscurity of this life and body, and the original mind principle in the involutionary descent is a thing of greater power to which we have not yet fully reached. Okay. So, higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind, these are all, we have not yet reached them, but they are much greater in power than our mortal mind. Not fully reached, there is a comma. Able to act with freedom in its own sphere or province, to build more revelatory constructions, more minutely inspired formations, more subtle and significant embodiments in which the light of truth is present and palpable. Now this is very interesting, we can discuss this to a certain extent. When I am only in my mind, I can only make constructions. But suppose I take my mind to the higher plane, I get powers which are not only constructions, mental constructions, but there is a truth in that. That's why you get the power to do things in the physical world. So how is Sri Aurobindo sitting in Pondicherry and curing people in Calcutta and helping Silvio Crasionas in Romania, helping John Kelly in the war? How is he doing that? Because he is outside his body and in the higher planes of consciousness. So those are realities, not constructions. That's what he's saying.
And we have to see that Mother is doing that now.
Oh, absolutely.
Out of her body.
Yes. In fact, the body has disappeared, but she is there. They are there.
And she can be everywhere.
Yes. That raises interesting questions. Can mother's power when she was in the body, but her consciousness is not in the body, is that power greater? Or is when the body is not there and she is still there in the subtle worlds, is her power greater? Is a question. Because the divine needs an instrument in the physical world. If the instrument is not there, how will they act? This is a very interesting, there is that famous case of the fellow who is drowning in the sea. Okay? And a ship comes and says, oh, you have come, we'll save you. He says, no, God is going to come. Okay? Another ship comes, he says, God is going to save me. You don't need to worry, go. Finally he drowns because nobody is able to save him. He goes to God and he says, I believed in you and you didn't save me. So God tells him, 4 times I sent my instruments to guide you, save you. He needs instruments. If there is no instrument, they can't act in the physical world.
If there's no instrument, but go ahead.
Couple of things. What you are saying outside the body. So Sri Aurobindo clearly says that in this yoga, the consciousness takes its station above the head. This is like a milestone in this yoga. So obviously that happened to him and mother, and their consciousness was not in the body. It was dwelling either in the must be in the Sahasrara chakra, and I don't know, maybe higher planes of consciousness above that. Number 1. Number 2. So you're saying that without the physical body, he cannot act. He needs a...
I am raising a question. I am raising a question.
Like for example, the case of John Kelly, whom Narad has met. So he's there in that trench in the Second World War, and Sri Aurobindo is able to appear before him and guide him.
Yes.
So why can't he do the same when his physical body is not there?
That's why I am asking the question.
Because even then it was not the physical body which he was using for communication.
If it is like that, then the necessity of an avatar will not be there.
No, the necessity of the avatar is different, he says, in the Essays on the Gita. He says the necessity of the avatar is only one, and that is to give a direct example to human being how to become divine.
That's one of the functions.
He says that is the chief function. Dharma Sansthapanarthaya.
Yeah, it's okay.
He says it's not.
But there is a guidance also. There is a guidance.
Guidance through direct example.
No, not only direct example. The very presence of a sends out vibrations which can affect others. It's not only guidance in that sense, but this.
Like, I mean, in Letters on Himself in the ashram, I was reading about death. And, like one of the disciples is raising questions like, we have to conquer death and all of that. And Sri Aurobindo talks about that will be the last result of the supramental change. And then in the last paragraph, he is talking about anything that would be a hindrance to the success in our work would be either my death or the death of the mother. So, in a way, is he saying that their death will cause like a slowing down of the accomplishment of their work?
So, in a sense, you are saying almost the same thing.
I mean, I don't know, like he said, Sri Aurobindo is saying in that response that anything that can come in between the success of the work is either the death, my own death, or...
So, what's Anmol saying?
I just want to say one thing, that what she's saying raises an important question. There is a book which has been brought out by Kirit Joshi with the title But It Is Done, The Victory of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, white color book. In that there is a conversation in the agenda, 14th March 1970. And he compiles from somewhere before in the agenda, and he sort of crowns it at that conversation where Mother has clearly said that now the supramental consciousness is able to act freely in the physical consciousness. And she says once the victory is won in consciousness, the actual victory in the material will follow as a matter of course.
Yeah, but when did that happen?
14th March 1970, she declares it. And she says it has taken this new consciousness which came on 1st January 1969, 14 months.
My question is, was Mother present in the physical body or not?
In the physical body, yes. But the fundamental victory was won, she's saying. She's saying the fundamental victory is won, very clearly.
But we also have to see...
No, so how does that contradict what I am asking?
It does not contradict. It does not contradict.
Yeah, and also like when the divine is in the physical, it's happening at a very rapid state, the evolution of consciousness and everything. But when it's withdrawn, it's still happening, no doubt about it. But I feel it's slower.
Can be made faster.
Can be made faster or slower now. It really
Because
depends, as you say, on the instruments.
Because on the other hand, we also have heard that when Sri Aurobindo left his body, it was a strategic retreat. And he was working from the subtle world, and Mother was here. But Mother is here. There is an instrument in the physical world. So this is a question which we can't answer fully.
You said somewhere that Mother's body was working as a buffer.
Yes.
Buffer or instrument, whatever you want, you can use the word.
Someone quoted this to me. I think who quoted it, I don't know. But Mother said this to someone that, do you think this is the Divine Mother, like this skin and body? I think you only said it. I don't know, but
now, how to transform this physical material?
That was the attempt being made. That was the attempt being made, and
it was in process.
Yeah, it was in process, and there's what's his name? Wreckham. George Wreckham says that it happened right up to the subtle physical. It's only the last stage of precipitation into the physical that has not yet taken place. It's a theory that he has put forward. But that's an interesting thing. Certainly, the work that she has done is solid and it is there. The next step has to be taken. We can't say that the work that she has done has disappeared. We can't say that.
Can we also say, like, for Mother's withdrawal also, it was a strategic withdrawal? Can we say that?
How to know? I don't know what
These are the mental constructions.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point. They're not truths. They're a question that we are throwing up.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all. Namaste.